Okay, James, we are starting. Let's just wait for the attendees to jump in. Hey everyone, thanks for joining. We're just going to give it a few more minutes for some more attendees to join. Thanks for joining everyone. Just going to give it one more minute and then we'll make a start. Okay, let's get started. Yep, thanks for joining everybody. Couple of quick housekeeping items. So this session is actually being recorded and we will send a link to the recording out to everybody that's registered for this demo. If you have any questions, please feel free to pop those into the Q&A as we go through. I'll try and answer as many of those as we go through live as I possibly can. My colleague James is on the call with me here as well, so James will jump in and answer any questions that he's able to, but we'll keep a track on those and I'm more than happy to take any questions that you guys have as we go through the demo. Okay, so this is probably going to go for about 30 minutes or so. I've got a couple of slides really to kind of cover off and set the scene for the first few minutes. And then what we're going to do is we're going to jump straight into Cloud SIEM. We're going to go through Cloud SIEM and I'm going to take an analyst view of the product. I'm going to talk a little bit about how I would use the tool to do my day-to-day workflow within the security operations. And we'll kind of showcase how the product is able to help you streamline that function within your security teams. So let me start off with a quick overview of who we are. So Sumo Logic is a global company. We have a presence in pretty much every kind of major country throughout the world. We have over 2,400 customers, 900 employees globally. Some of the exciting stuff there, we actually analyze around about 1.7 exabytes of data every day. And we have over 175,000 active users that are actually using that data for the organizations that they work for. And as you can see on my slide there, that equates to around about 3.24 quadrillion records that are analyzed every day. And that's just the power of having a cloud hosted solution. Couple of other things, quick things there. We are the AWS Partner of the Year for 2021. And you can see some of the companies that we work with at the bottom of the slide there as well. So we have four kind of products within our security area within Sumo Logic. Of course, we're going to focus a little bit on Cloud SIEM today. But let me very quickly cover off the remaining ones that you can see on the screen there in front of you. So starting off over on the left-hand side, you can see we have audit and compliance. So this is highly scalable. It's a secure platform where you can store all of your data. And it's actually backed by numerous certification and attestations as well. It comes with a host of out-of-the-box pre-built compliance apps. So you can actually install these apps relevant to the data that you're ingesting. And then you can enjoy rapid time to value for the visibility of your security for auditing, etc. The next one there really is cloud security monitoring and analytics. Now, this takes a step on from the audit and compliance and then starts to overlay it with things like threat intelligence and the ability to use our CrowdStrike out-of-the-box threat intel to start looking for indicators of compromise across all of my log sources. Additionally, cloud security monitoring and analytics does that analytics side of it, and it does some additional machine learning capabilities out of the box as well, being able to do things like log reduce and log compare. So take maybe a couple of thousand logs, narrow them down to a much smaller a much smaller subset, and then be able to view just the changes that are within those logs. Okay, and then finally, log compare allows me to take a look at logs that I'm generating today, maybe compare them with a subset of logs from yesterday, and actually look at what's changed over the last 24 hours within my environment. We also include things like community threat benchmarking using our global intelligence service. So that gives me the ability to look at certain event types, maybe something like AWS guard duty, cloud trial, etc., and look at how my organization is compared to others that Sumo Logic has as customers. So I can see whether I have very unique or unusual guard duty alerts in my environment versus other customers. Okay. Then we have Cloud SIEM, obviously, which I'm going to kind of go through it in a little bit more in depth as we go through. But Cloud SIEM brings in some additional threat correlation for me. So it's analyzing those logs in real time, correlating across all of those logs. And additionally as well, that gives me the ability to actually look back over several weeks. So I'm able to start picking up things like low and slow attacks, which is something that's quite difficult to do on some of the older legacy SIEM platforms. The benefit with Cloud SIEM is, again, as per the whole Sumo platform, it's built in the cloud for the cloud, but it still has that ability to bring in on-premise log sources. So it's perfect for any customer that either has on-premise, maybe they're migrating to the cloud, or they're actually cloud focused. It automates incident prioritization. We have a capability in there called Insights, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in depth. But that kind of automates the investigation phase for me. It takes it one step from having to sit there as a SOC analyst and sift through thousands of alerts. Okay, it starts to reduce those down, tracking entities to give me higher fidelity alerts. And then it has built-in workflow, makes life nice and easy to be able to go in and progress those insights, investigate, close, pass to other teams, etc. And then finally there you can see our Cloud SOAR solution. So once I have a Cloud SIEM, which is now producing a lower number of high fidelity alerts, it's easy for me then to automate a response to those. Maybe go and block an IP address on the firewall, reset a user password, etc. So let's have a look at some of the common challenges for security analysts today. The number one thing there really is around digital transformation. So as we start to move all of our infrastructure to the cloud, we run the risk of introducing blind spots. Maybe our legacy tools weren't really built to ingest logs from the cloud. So, we may have visibility gaps there. Additionally, as well, I need to make sure I have visibility during my cloud or my digital transformation. So still be able to monitor my on-premise whilst ingesting those logs for the cloud sources that we're moving to as well. Talking about existing security tools, many SOC teams are tired of that slow, inefficient, and manual workflow that they're used to having in those legacy tools. And with the recent shift in threat landscape, and of course these new attack surfaces of moving to the cloud infrastructure, security analysts need help speeding up investigation. We're getting more alerts being generated. And unfortunately, it's not something that we can just throw people at, go and hire more security analysts. We know that there's a worldwide shortage of security excuse me, security professionals globally. Another top challenge there as well is alert fatigue. And again, I kind of just hinted on that slightly, where we're moving to the cloud. I'm bringing more alerts in now. So if I'm in a transformation, I have all of my legacy on-prem tools alerting into the SIEM. And then I'm adding in additional alerts and events coming in from my cloud sources. So of course, that's going to start generating more security noise. So I need to have a modern SIEM solution that's able to look through all of those and break those down into those higher fidelity alerts that we talked about. So we're reducing false positives and making life just a lot easier for our security analysts to work with. So how does Sumo Logic help with these particular problems? Well, the number one there is that ability to ingest, pretty much any cloud source, whether you're moving to the cloud that's being hosted on AWS or Azure or Google. We can bring all of those log sources in, along with all of those modern security focused tools as well. Maybe using Netscope for visibility of what's happening as your users are transiting in and out of the cloud. Additionally, as well, speeding up those investigations. We talked a little bit around how the insights will do that, and I'll show you that in a second. But the ability to sift through thousands of alerts, give me a smaller number of higher fidelity alerts to work with. But at the same time, enriching that information, giving me more context. We all know that within security, context is key. It's the most important thing you can have when an alert is generated. What's the context around why, who's the user, etc. And then finally there, cutting through that sheer noise so that I don't have to go and hire a huge number of new SOC analysts in to come and help me work within security operations. So I'm just going to take you through a quick example, actually. This is a proof of value we did with a customer. And that customer was using an existing legacy SIEM platform. So over a 45-day proof of value, this customer was ingesting around about 10 billion records into our Cloud SIEM platform. Now, in turn, these records are processed across our rules engine, and that generated 9.8 million signals. Now, with most SIEMs, using standard correlation rules, that's where you would stop. That's where I would have to spend my time as a security analyst. And I've worked with plenty of customers in the past that have been generating literally, tens of millions of alerts a day. And even with the biggest security team in the world, you're never going to be able to get through that sheer number of alerts, in a day-to-day basis. So Cloud SIEM kind of takes that one step further. Using our insight clustering capability that's tracking an entity, and that entity can be a user, it could be an IP address, host name, etc. It starts to track that entity's behavior across those generated signals. And then eventually that'll create something called an insight. Excuse me. So you can see here, we've gone from 9.8 million signals down to 175 insights. From those 175 insights for this particular customer, 95 of those were classed as no action. What do I mean by no action? Maybe it was an administrator doing their normal day-to-day job, adding somebody to a security group that may have triggered a signal. And other behavior. So it's not a false positive, it's not malicious, it's just normal, no action required behavior. From that 175, 15 of those were actually false positives, and then would have required further tuning, enhancing, tweaking the rules a little bit. It's worth also noting there as well, that equates to around about 9% false positive rate. I've worked with a lot of customers where the false positive rate has been like 90+. I don't know about you guys that have joined us today, you know, what kind of number of false positives that you get from your existing SIEM platforms. But traditionally, you know, getting 90% false positives is not unusual. It's pretty common with the majority of SIEM vendors. And then finally there you can see, so from those 175 insights, actually 65 of those were true incidents, okay. So we've kind of gone from a signal to an insight ratio of 56,000 security alerts to 1 true alert. And again, you know, that's a pretty substantial number there. When you think about, you know, normally you'd have to be investigating about 9.8 million signals over that time period. So you can kind of see there, you know, how we're able to filter down using our insight clustering capability. So this next screen here really just gives you a very quick overview of what our heads-up display looks like. Okay, 3 key things there really to look at: the record, signals, and insights. And we'll actually take a look at those now. Let me just jump across into our Cloud SIEM, and we'll talk about those in the real environment. Okay. All right. So this is a real Cloud SIEM that's running here currently. Let's talk about those record, signals, and insights that we saw on that previous screen. So 11 million records over 24 hours. That's what I've ingested into Cloud SIEM. Okay. Those may be coming from on-premise legacy, maybe firewalls, Active Directory, etc. They could be events coming in from AWS, CloudTrail, GuardDuty, or any of those other cloud native tools that we may have within our environment. As I mentioned, those 11 million records get processed across our rules engine. The rules engine out of the box covers somewhere around about 600 content rules. Those are curated by a security team within Sumo Logic. And that security team actually consists of a group of guys and girls who have served time in security operations. Okay, they've spent time as SOC analysts, SOC engineers, etc. So we create those rules. Incidentally, those rules actually get updated a couple of times a week. So if we get a notification of maybe a new vulnerability, things like Log4j, SolarWinds, etc., we're able to push that content out once it's been fully tested across multiple environments within Sumo. We push that content out literally within a couple of hours in some cases, certainly within 24 hours for the majority of the others. It's worth noting as well, on top of those 600 out of the box rules, you can go in and create your own custom content as well. Okay. You know, we have some customers using Cloud SIEM are doing some very out of the box things with custom detection. So then I have 519,000 signals in this 24-hour period here that have been triggered from my 11 million records. Okay, so they've been run across the 600 plus rules, triggered 519,000 signals. Now, as I mentioned during some of the slides, we have this capability called the Insight Clustering Engine, or Adaptive Signal Clustering, we call it. So this engine is now looking at those signals that are being generated. Okay, it's looking at the entity involved. And again, that's a user, IP address, host name. In fact, it could be anything. I can go in and create a custom entity on any field that I might get within a log. It tracks those entities, clusters together those related signals. It uses some risk scoring for the user. It's also using some enrichment. And then also it has that time window that we look back over as well. So I mentioned low and slow attacks. So some of these signals, maybe I've got a malicious actor in my environment and this guy's moving and doing things really slowly. So they might only be triggering 1 or 2 security alerts a day. But because of the adaptive signal clustering, I have that ability to go back over several weeks and still keep track of that activity. So eventually what happens is when my signals are clustered together, okay, the risk score for the entity reaches a set level. And again, I can customize any of these values. They're clustered together into what we call an insight. So we've literally gone from 11 million records here into 6 insights, 6 things that I need to really go and look at now as a SOC analyst. Okay. A couple of other quick things on this screen before we dive in a little bit deeper. So this, this radar view in the center, it pretty much gives me that same information. Over here, I have some very quick snapshot metrics around mean time to detect, mean time to respond, mean time to remediate. Now I can push all of that information back into our core Sumo logic platform, and I can do some pretty comprehensive metrics and dashboarding around security operations, etc. there as well. Over on the right-hand side, it's what I call my baseball card snapshot view of my latest insight that's been generated. We'll talk about some of this information actually when we jump into the insight in a second. And then this is this kind of gives me information about my workflow, you know, who's moving insights from new to updated, who's working on certain insights, etc. Okay, let's jump in now and actually take a look at what an insight is. And I'll start kind of talking a little bit about how we do some of this workflow within Cloud SIEM. So we're starting off here with what we call our Kanban viewboard. All of my new insights that are generated will appear in this new column on the left-hand side. If I want to reassign these to any of these teams, and these are actually customizable as well, so I can have as many teams in here as I want, rename some of these, etc. I just simply drag it across to the relevant team, and then that's reassigned that particular insight to that team for me. A couple of things here to notice with regards to some of these insights that are being generated. So the name itself, the number is sequential. So every time a new one is generated, that number will automatically increment to the next number. The rest of the insight name is generated from the MITRE ATT&CK framework. So every single rule that we create within Cloud SIEM, whether it's curated by Sumo or you guys go in and create your own, you can actually assign, you know, the attack stages to it. And you can have multiple layers added to each signal as you go through. Okay, those get extracted across into the name of the insight, as you can see there. So the one that my mouse is hovering over at the moment is being detected as a command and control with execution. It also contains the entity. In this case, it's a user. Okay. The duration that this insight took to generate, so 3 hours in this particular case, how many signals are part of this insight, and the overall risk or the overall severity level for this particular insight as well. Now, some of these you'll also notice have what we call a global confidence score. Now, because we're a SaaS-based solution, it gives us the ability to normalize information from all of our customers using Cloud SIEM. And what we do is we look at how those customers react to insights that are generated. So if they mark something as a false positive, as a no action or a real incident, we normalize that information, and then we look at similar insights being triggered across all of our customer base. And that gives us an ability then to apply something called a global confidence score. How confident are we that this is a real incident? I'm pretty sure there's no other SIEM vendor out there that is able to do that. Certainly not from an on-premise legacy SIEM vendor solution. So the power of that really is if I've got junior security analysts working within my team, it's a little help to prioritize things further for them as well. So the higher the confidence score, the more confident we are that it's a real incident. Okay. Let me jump into one of these. We'll have a look at this one. I've moved across into in progress here. So this will take me into what I call my workbench view. There's 2 main panels here that populate with information. So my left-hand panel really contains that information here around what's the name of the insight. The top part here is where I can continue my workflow, and we'll look at how we would use that in a second. The lower part of this panel here, again, gives me a bit more of an in-depth view of what we saw on the snapshot. So how many signals are part of this, this clustered insight? How long did it take to detect? When was it last seen? Here are those tactics and those techniques that we talked about from the MITRE framework. Okay. I can also create a tag as part of my investigation. I can add additional comments in here as well. The main panel on the right-hand side then, this is where I kind of have my timeline of user activity. So for this particular one here, it's really easy for me to investigate what's happened for this particular user. So as I scroll down through the signals that have been triggered, the very first one I've got here is a threat intel match telling me that, hey, this domain that I'm seeing in this log is matching a known malicious domain. You can see at a high level here, it's containing a lot of those normal fields you'd expect within the SIEM. So things like IP addresses, URLs, the username, etc. As I scroll down through here, the next thing I can see is a Zscaler alert that's been triggered. And again, it's picking up this URL as being malicious. And again, these are all in chronological order. Okay, so you can see we start up here on the 21st and work our way down. Finally, for this particular insight, I've got a Sentinel-1 alert telling me that malicious keylog has been detected. So as a SOC analyst, it's pretty clear to me what's happened here is a user's clicked on a URL and downloaded this malicious malware that's been installed onto the endpoint. Okay. The username is consistent through each of these signals. That's the entity that we've been tracking in this particular case. There's some additional really cool things in here, though. You'll recall at the beginning of the presentation, I talked about how important it is to have context. So within Cloud SIEM as well, we actually do a lot of context enrichment automatically. So for example, the username here, if it's an Active Directory user, I can pull in information from that user, simply hover over the username, and I get this pop-up panel here now that gives me a little bit more information about who this user is, maybe where they're located, what team they work in, etc. Okay. You'll also notice there's a couple of other tabs here at the top as well. I'm going to look at enrichments first of all. So if I click on this one, I can also bring in additional enrichment here as well. There's a couple of ways we can do this. One is to have an enrichment server running, which can go and grab information from something like maybe CrowdStrike, Sentinel-1, Carbon Black, etc. So it'll go and grab that information from my endpoint security tool. Additionally, it might reach out, maybe I've got an account and a free API for something like a virus totem. So it'll reach out, it'll do a lookup of that domain automatically and then bring that information back in as well. These particular ones here, I'm actually running Sumo Logic's Cloud SIEM product in the background as well. And automatically what happens is every time an insight is generated here, it runs a playbook in Cloud SIEM, and then Cloud SIEM goes and grabs this additional context for me and brings that back in as well. Okay, so there's a couple of different ways that we can achieve that. Here's that Sentinel-1 one I was talking about. So you can see it's bringing in a lot more context about the endpoint from that security tool. If I come back up to the top, click on entities, I can now look at any related entities for this particular user. Okay, so Deb Smith is my entity that we're tracking as part of this insight. I can see that she's been associated with, with this IP address, various different host names. She's been associated with this particular threat, which is also part of this particular insight, of course. Automatically, it's bringing that inventory in for me from Active Directory. And then as I scroll down through here, I can see any signals that this particular has, generated previously. Okay. This is all within one workflow, one workspace, one panel. Okay, there's no having to pivot out to different security tools to get this information. Certainly, from my time as a SOC analyst over the last 20 years or so, maybe I'd have to jump to Active Directory, look up the user, find out more information. Maybe I have to copy an IP or a host name, open up a new tab, go to VirusTotal, run a search against all of that. All time consuming, right? But here, it's bringing all of that information in for me automatically. So ultimately here, it's taken me, literally, it's taken me 10 minutes to explain it to you. But if I was investigating this as a security analyst, it's literally taken me less than 60 seconds to build a picture here of what's happened for this particular user. Okay. Once I've run my investigation, depending on what my processes are within my SOC or my security operations team, maybe I'm running a small team, do the investigation myself. If I'm happy, I can go in and close this insight. Okay. Click on Close Insight, pop in a resolution here. So I could say this is resolved. Maybe I've run a full scan and a cleanup on the endpoint. Maybe I've quarantined it from the network. Called the user up or messaged them on Slack and told them about some user education, that kind of thing. So I can actually close this off in here. I'd mark it as resolved. I can add any additional comments and then close the insight accordingly. If I'm running a bigger team and maybe I want to reassign this to my endpoint security team, okay, say, hey, can you guys go and do a quarantine of this endpoint for me? There's a couple of ways I can do that. If I've got them set up as a resolver group within Cloud SIEM, then I can come in here and I can actually assign it to that team or that person direct. Alternatively, I might have an integration with maybe with Slack, PagerDuty. Maybe I'm also running ServiceNow. So I can use an integration with any of those tools and pass this off direct for further action that way. Okay. That's kind of a quick overview, I guess, of what an insight looks like. Let's actually just go back and take a look at one more very quickly. I'm going to pick on this one. This one's got a few more signals in it, so it's a little bit more interesting. Again, similar kind of context, right? This is my workbench view. I'm going to run through this now as if I was investigating it as a SOC analyst. So my very first signal here has come from my proof point, my threat solution I have on my emails. Okay, it's telling me that I've got a user who's received an email with a phishing link, and concerning the click was permitted. Okay. Again, all of those extracted fields are here at this top level. If I want to look at it in a little bit more in depth, I can click on the signal itself. Takes me into the signal view, and I can start looking at all of the fields that we would bring across as part of this security alert. Anything with a gold star is a favorite field, drops it into the header at the top for me. Again, makes life easy. I can quickly scan this for the information I'm looking for without having to scroll all the way through the signal that's been generated. Okay, come back out to my main view. As I'm scrolling down through here, and again, these are all in time order. This is an automated timeline of user activity. I can see I've got an alert from Checkpoint saying that a malicious file was allowed. As I scroll down through, I've got a CrowdStrike alert from my endpoint security here saying, hey, I've detected malware on the system. And again, those fields are being extracted so I can see what the malware is, etc. And then finally, I've got a threat intel match here as well. It's saying that, a device IP, a threat intel file hash match has been seen. So the file hash for the malware was in a threat intel list that I'm referencing. Maybe I've pulled that in from a Stix or a taxi feed, for example. Again, less than a minute, maybe 2 minutes there to investigate what's happened here. Pretty clear picture. Users received an email with a phishing link, clicked on the link, downloaded malware, malware is executed on my endpoint. Okay. I spent many years as a SOC analyst dealing with phishing email and email-based attacks coming into the security team for the organization I was working with. Typically I might get, I'm going to get an endpoint security alert saying, hey, there's malware detected. Then I have to build this timeline manually. I have to find out, how did the malware get there? Did a user click on the link? Did they plug in a USB drive? Did they get it in an email? So I'd then have to start searching all of my other log sources, looking at the times, looking at the entity, the user or the IP or the host name, etc., and then manually build together this timeline. From my own experience, that used to take me around about 2 hours per investigation, where I had, a user that had clicked on a link and actually installed malware. Here I'm down to less than 2 minutes to get that same information. Okay. Again, as per the other insight, I've got my related entities view here for this particular IP. So I can see who this IP address has been associated with, any previous files, any other, communicating IPs, etc. All that information's there for me. And again, that enrichment tab, bringing that information in for me automatically. Okay. So that's just expediting my investigation time, minimizing the amount of time I have something malicious in my environment. The quicker I can clear up this malware, the quicker I can make sure I'm not exfiltrating data, etc. So again, same thing, workflow would be the same. I would either investigate it, close it myself, pass it to another team, etc. Okay. That kind of covers off how insights are generated. And there's a good question there actually from Lokesh. So, does it have an existing library of use cases? Yeah, that's a really good question. And let me jump in and kind of talk a little bit about that now. So we talked a little bit about the content that we curate here, within Cloud SIEM itself. This is our kind of demo environment. So the number of rules there is quite a lot higher than that kind of 600 I mentioned. Okay, but yes, we have 600 rules. They will cover pretty much anything from, a malware alert on an endpoint through to maybe brute force attempt, several failed logins followed by a success, typical things we build within a SIEM solution. It can be looking for, malicious user agents. And as you can see here, threat intel matches, multiple failed authentications, password spray attacks. There's a whole stack of use cases and typical kind of security detections that you would expect from a SIEM platform. Okay, and they're all there and they're all curated automatically by Sumo. But as I mentioned, I can go in and I can create these manually as well. I can create match rules, threshold rules, chain rules, aggregation rules, etc. Okay, pretty easy, pretty straightforward to be able to go and do. There's one really important thing that's worth considering with Cloud SIEM. Although I can come in here, for example, and I could build a threshold or a chain rule and do some basic correlation. X number of failed logins followed by a success. The insight clustering capability, which is fundamental purpose of this solution, is an automatic correlation engine, right? It will automatically correlate across any signal coming in, tracking that entity. So now maybe as a SOC engineer, I don't have to think about what happens if a user's credentials get compromised in an email and then they get access to this file share. And then they use this tool to, do some lateral movement and grab something from this database, etc. I don't have to think about complex correlation rules and endless scenarios of likely attacks within my environment. If I have signals being generated from that entity, I'm automatically correlating that behavior for the entity across anything that's happening. Okay. So it takes a lot of the time and effort away from having content engineering teams within the platform, etc. Couple of quick things here then to wrap up. If I want to have a look at what signals are being generated within the platform without waiting for the insight capability to kick in and show me, I can come in here and I can view any of these signals. I have some pretty comprehensive filtering here as well. I can look for anything being generated by a specific user, by an IP address, anything with a set user agent, anything from a specific log source, etc. Okay, I can build out my my search capabilities here. I could just prioritize them. I want to look at all of the severity 7 and aboves. Okay, I can go in and do that, or I can just scroll through these. Maybe I've come in, I've worked through all my insights at the beginning of my shift, and now I just want to start doing a bit of threat hunting. Look at what else is happening in here as well. So yeah, I have that ability to to come in here and kind of work through those. I can do a similar thing for entities as well. Okay, so I can come in and look at what entities are doing currently. Here's here, for an example, this user I have at the top, I can see that the current activity score for this user is at 12 points of severity or risk. I can take a deeper view. I can look at what this particular user has been generating. I can apply any specific tags or view any tags for this particular user in here as well. Okay. So I can come in ahead of, like I said, insights being generated and look at what behavior is happening, etc. Thanks for that question that's just come in there. James is just popping that reply in there for you. So I won't kind of jump in and steal his thunder. So yeah, pretty much that kind of wraps up, I guess, Cloud SIEM and what it is and how it works, etc. Anytime we have new content, you'll get a little notification icon here, for example. So I can come down here, click on this panel, and it normally would tell me what's been released. I don't know what's happening there today. That's not working like it should do. We did a change of our Cloud SIEM environment the other day from one location to another, and it looks like that bit's broken. So my apologies for that. Normally what would happen there is it would list any of the content that's been updated in the latest release. It would also give me the ability to click on the hyperlink and view that more in depth as well. Okay. We have pretty comprehensive APIs, as you would expect, within the solution. So I can integrate with other tools. I can also create content offline. I say offline. I can create rules and push those in by API. So if I wanted to use a centralized content management tool, I could do that if I wanted to. Maybe I'm running multiple instances of Cloud SIEM for a big global organization, and I want to be able to export content rules out, drop them into another one. I have full capability to do that within both the UI and also using APIs as well. Okay. And that pretty much kind of sums that up. I'm mindful we're kind of a little bit over the time I said that we would be. So with that, let me just drop back to my last screen here to talk about our deployment locations. So as you can see, we obviously we're hosted on AWS. And in answer to kind of part of that question that came in, we're SaaS based, we automatically scale up and down. If you're suffering from something like a denial of service attack, and I hope that's never the case, and suddenly your log volume is now 10 times more than it was an hour ago, our system automatically scales automatically. Okay, it will add additional compute and processing to cater for that log ingest. It's not going to take the SIEM platform down. And I've seen that so many times on legacy SIEMs that I've had to work with, where a sudden increase and the whole thing grinds to a halt. It's been completely unusable, and of course that's the last thing you want during a major security event. So everything we do is hosted on AWS, and we are in these geographical regions. So for those of us down here in APAC, we have a presence within Sydney, Tokyo and Mumbai. But of course, we've got customers that want to host elsewhere. Australian customers want to host in the US because their parent company is America. So we can cater for that, not a problem at all. Okay. Last thing here then, if you have any further questions or you want some more information around Cloud SIEM, I'll leave that QR code on the screen there for you for a few seconds. So you can grab that with your mobiles if you find that useful. And aside from that, thank you very much for joining us on this session. Hopefully it's given you a few insights into our Cloud SIEM tool and its capabilities. There's no other questions that are in the screen there. So yeah, once again, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. And I hope you guys all enjoy the rest of your day. So thank you very much and look forward to talking to you again.